What do you make of this past week with Donald Trump declaring himself king? Um, the right is basically going to say, "Oh, the libs are just being owned, and they're being hysterical once again about Donald Trump's authoritarian impulses." As he allows an unelected billionaire to ransack the treasury for reasons that may or may not be related to some cryptocurrency deal that they have going on. I mean, there still needs to be reporting on that, but I
Hmm.
saw that CBS is looking to, quote, retaliate after they settled with Trump to get in his favor. And they say they have some reporting on a crypto deal that they've been sitting on, which, I mean, come on, that's unethical. He's the president of the United States. But, like,
Yeah.
I guess what's been your overall reaction to these cuts and the harm that they're causing so rapidly?
It's horrifying. If you look at the Progress 2025 tracker, the entirety of Project 2025 is now 35% complete. I put out a video on this today. It was at 34% yesterday. Today it's at 35%. Some objectives are moving along faster. USAID is 100% complete. DEIA, 100% complete. LGBTQ rights, 67% complete. So they're moving along twice as fast as was intended by Project 2025, which was supposed to be a 180-day project. And if they actually do 100% of Project 2025, then it's on track to be done by the end of April, I think. So it's a lot because the strategy is to overwhelm us, to flood the zone or whatever Steve Bannon called it. Um, and the Heritage Foundation president said that this was a political revolution. It was the second American Revolution, and it would be bloodless insofar as the left chooses to let it be that way. So I think that right now, if you're not hysterical, if you're not being accused of having Trump derangement syndrome, then you're not sounding the alarm enough. You're not like you have to be hysterical. This is genuinely a hair on fire moment because like MAGA, I think we need to be real, as Chris Clue put it at town hall in Huntington. This is a modern day Nazi movement. That's exactly what this is. And this attempt to gaslight us into thinking that everything is copacetic and he's not really wanting to be a dictator. He's just trolling. I think that is complete horseshit. Everything that's happening right now is extremely dangerous, and I genuinely don't think that we're going to be able to vote our way out of a situation like this. It might be too late. Like once you open Pandora's box, it's hard to close it. And we already see Trump defying court orders. Experts like they won't say that Trump is defying court orders, but he's defying court orders. I mean, if you look at the specifics here, a judge will say you can't do that. He'll do it anyway, and then they'll give some flimsy legal justification. So I guess the logic is that unless he specifically tells a judge no, then it's not a constitutional crisis. When we're beyond that talk, I think that the debate needs to end and the talk about action needs to be taking place right now because it's horrifying. I mean, you can basically Putin gives a constitutional update if he's going to run for president again. Like all dictators want to do this. I'm not saying Trump is a dictator yet, but like I think we're gradually moving into territory where we could be a soft dictator or a de facto dictator, or we kind of just become an illiberal regime. But I think that people are right to be afraid. You shouldn't don't be so afraid that you kind of check out of reality and you become blackpilled, but don't let them accuse you of being hysterical or having Trump derangement syndrome because they're trying to get you to just shut up. And no, I think that right now this is really the moment where we need to be screaming from the rooftops because it's extremely alarming.
Yeah, I mean, what do you make of Musk's role in this? I mean, it's a very odd display to have him basically standing beside the president and speaking as a duo. I know that this is very much in the vision of the Yarvin ideology of basically
Yeah.
having him be the CEO and Donald Trump is the president of the United States or incorporated. And it feels to me like this should be the most straightforward case ever to make the case that the right is on the side of the billionaires. The Democrats make that difficult, but that feels like the easiest kind of layup politically. But they're basically banking on the fact that like power is power. Not knowledge may be power, but power is power, and we're in power right now. And it's kind of difficult to get a toehold.
Yeah, I think that the Elon Musk thing is a real turning point for the country. And when I read the article from Rolling Stone about how Hakeem Jeffries met with Silicon Valley oligarchs to kind of mend fences, that was when it kind of clicked for me where it's like, oh, there's no going back after this because now there's going to be these billionaires who throw billions of dollars at both parties to get as much power as Elon Musk. I mean, one of the quotes from a donor advisor in that article is that these billionaires that Hakeem Jeffries was talking to were pissed that they've never gotten this much power. So I think that it's going to be really difficult to go back to the standard oligarchic corruption that we saw, which almost seems preferable at this point. Like I'd rather do that again than whatever the fuck this is. I'm sorry, I don't know if I could swear.
No, it's all right.
Okay. Sorry, I have a sailor mouth. But it's going to get progressively worse, and I feel like Citizens United. We all knew that this was going to be inevitable, but to the extent that like we'd have a billionaire just being the de facto president, unilaterally hollowing out agencies, taking on the Labor Department and any agency that is regulating his companies, like I don't know if anybody anticipated that. Even as bad as Project 2025 was, for those of us who knew that Trump was associated to it, Anna Kasparian, like this is so much worse than just Project 2025. Like we're getting more than Project 2025, and it's so overwhelming. It's hard to keep up with everything. There's little things that are going unaddressed that should be on people's radar, but there's just too much. Like for example, the DHS, they just got rid of a rule that stops them from collecting intelligence on people specifically on the basis of sexual orientation, which is a little bit of a red flag. We know that they don't want queer people to exist in public, but the fact that they're doing that and they specifically want to collect data on people who are gay, I'm sure that will apply to trans as well. But right now it's sexual orientation based on my knowledge of it. That's alarming. Like they are going after their political opponents, and it's not just going to be people in mainstream media. I think at some point in time, they're going to know what we're saying and they're going to target us as well. I'm not saying they're going to like kidnap us and throw us in a gulag, although that's possible. But like, I think that, what you're going to see is soft power being utilized against Google, for example, start censoring YouTube more, things like that. So it's progressing along so fast that like, I think that we need to sound the alarms and do what we can,
Right.
Which at this point, not a lot, right?
Yeah, we're building for the primary in 2026, but we're also, I think, trying to focus on building union power and organizing within your community. One of the when you talk about how it's difficult to keep up with the level of cruelty that this administration is a part of, and you just have these stories that slip through the cracks like this. CNN's Boris Sanchez thankfully did cover it here. This is an 11-year-old girl who took her own life in I'm not sure if she's in Texas. Texas, yeah. She took her own life after being essentially bullied by her fellow students who were threatening to call ICE on her family. And this came up because you were bringing up just the rampant LGBTQ discrimination that is coming from the top. But this is how these are the community effects of policy that is enabled at the presidential level. Like, it's not just the actions that are horrific and cruel that affect people, but it's also what it gives permission for folks to say. And this little girl was a victim of that. Here's that report.
Suicide of an 11-year-old girl. Jocelyn Rojo Carranza's mother says her daughter took her own life after being bullied at school, after some students threatened to call ICE agents to deport her family. Today, we're hearing from other parents about the taunting that allegedly went on inside the school, where many of the students are Hispanic. CNN national correspondent Ed Lavandera joins us now. And Ed, what are you hearing about what was going on at this school?
Well, we've spoken with several parents over the last day who described that the scenes inside this school where Jocelyn Carranza went to school, that there had been an uptick in the amount of taunting and chattering about ICE, students being picked on and teased about ICE coming to arrest their relatives and people who had come from mixed immigration status homes and this sort of thing. So some concerning descriptions of what we've heard from several parents away from the family of Jocelyn Carranza.
So there she is. She was in 6th grade. She loved to play the French horn, and she loved to swim and make TikTok videos. So that's but that these things have an effect, and as I said, it's not just the policy effect; it's the stuff that's downstream like this. Mike, your reaction?
Yeah, no, it's genuinely so heartbreaking, and I hope that people do understand the effect that this has at the individual level on people, because it has changed the culture as well. And I think that we saw this with Donald Trump last time, where you saw white supremacists emboldened, but it also emboldens the worst people in the country who just feel entitled. Like, you know, we saw the rise of Karens, where they were trying to call the police on people of color and Black people who were doing barbecues, barbecue Becky and whatnot. And that's definitely happening this time, where people feel entitled to basically use the threat to call ICE as like their way of getting people to shut up or going after their enemies. And it's having a real impact on just people in the community. Like my niece, for example, she like when after like the first or second week of Trump's term, she called me and she was like freaking out because she also has a trans daughter. My niece is closer to my sister. We're very close in age. But, you know, she has a trans daughter, freaking out about what's going to happen. Her trans daughter is horrified by this. And then she herself has been avoiding grocery stores because she is afraid that she's going to be questioned by ICE. And she's Mexican, but she's never had to worry about that. But she like now all of a sudden, and she like the way she explained it to me was like, I don't know if I'm like being paranoid and overthinking this, but like the looks that I get now are different than the looks that I got a couple of months ago, where it feels like I have to watch over my shoulder, and I don't know if that's in my head or not. And it really has a massive impact on people. I mean, there were polls on just like queer youth and the effect that the right-wing legislation was having at them, and it destroyed their mental health. So, I mean, these stories, it's not just about like who is directly affected. It's about the people who are indirectly affected. And it takes a toll mentally. And so I hate to say this, but I feel like that type of story is probably going to become pretty common if things continue in this way, because it's not just a policy effect that we're seeing from Donald Trump. It's a cultural effect. There's a lot of Americans who they get off on the cruelty, and they feel like they have power over people. And so that threat to call ICE on their neighbor, like we're going to see that, and it's disgusting. And these types of people, we need to be mindful of their existence.
They are the anonymous bankers are giving quotes to the Financial Times. Like, I get to say the R word again. I mean, now we're in it's also Me Too backlash. We're in an extremely misogynistic time. We're also in an extremely racist time, anti-trans and anti-LGBTQ more broadly. There are already efforts to try to get the Supreme Court to overturn Obergefell. They're cropping up in states like North Dakota. This is how this works. And this is why the accelerationist theory that back in the day was being promoted by some folks is the dumbest political theory that is so anti-historical, because this does not open up the breaking of these institutions is not a foregone conclusion that they can be rebuilt. And the Democratic Party, as currently constructed, has not shown the capacity to respond. Like we saw it with Biden. He did try to do some good things domestically, and antitrust is good, but like you need to be much more aggressive in trying to safeguard our institutions and the American public if you are actually serious about building something that can be sustainable and prevent Trump from getting reelected again. And of course, that goes back to, funding a genocide. Hard to look like the more humane option when that is your policy that people are seeing every day on their phones, and when they're hurt in their wallets because of a cost of living crisis.
Yeah, I wish that people would listen more to political scientists, because all of this is predictable and you can map it out. Like, it's a simple matter of materialism versus post-materialism. Like if you look at developing countries, there's not a lot of progress when it comes to civil rights, civil liberties, and whatnot. And that's because people in these countries prioritize their material well-being, their security, food, water, basic things, shelter. And so they don't focus on things like social justice, even if they may care about them. But as they begin to develop, then they switch to post-materialist ideologies where they start to vie for civil rights, civil liberties. They want freedom of speech. But, that can be reversed because if the standard of living goes down, then they go back to materialism. That's kind of what we're seeing in the United States, where people are frustrated with their economic condition. They can't buy a house. We start to see the unraveling of civil rights. Roe versus Wade gets overturned. So it's just a matter of like, if you have a Democrat that actually wants to change the country, they have to improve people's material conditions. You can't just make some tweaks around the edges and say, well, I expanded Medicare to 2 million more people. Like you need radical systemic change. And that's what I think that the Democratic Party, they know that they need to do that, but they don't want to do it because they're just too corrupt. If you watch the interview with Jon Stewart and Hakeem Jeffries, I think you all talked about it on your show, actually. Hakeem Jeffries was talking about how, well, the Democratic Party, it's a messaging problem because we actually did do transformational change, Obamacare, and Jon Stewart was trying to get him to say the words Medicare for all and trying to get him to understand that, well, Obamacare was within the framework of this corrupt system that people don't like, where there's profit. And I'm paraphrasing all this, by the way. It's been a week since I watched it. But Hakeem Jeffries just wouldn't say that they need transformative change. He actually, like, I don't think he believes this, but he maintained that Obamacare was the transformative change. And that's that. We just needed to talk better about it. So Democrats just aren't up to the challenge. And it's sad because so long as they refuse to actually do what they need to do, which is actually fundamentally change the country, do an FDR type of revolution, we're just going to go back and forth, right, between Democrats, Republicans, because there's a lot of people who don't really know, like they don't follow politics. They're not as tuned in as all of us. So if things are bad, they look at who's in power and they vote against them. That's what they do every single time. These are the normiest of normies. I know people like this where they're not overtly political. They just, their friend or coworker will tell them something and then they'll parrot that. But they don't know why things are bad. So if you actually want to have a majority party in this country, it's going to be somebody that it's going to be like a party or a leader that actually does meaningful change and improves people's material conditions. But Democrats aren't interested in that.
The model is down south in Mexico. It's just that
exactly
the forces of capital in this country are enormous, and that's the model. Hopefully, if we have, like, say, I don't know, a lefty. A lefty man at the top. I don't know who that would be. AOC VP. Then she takes over afterwards, like Scheinbaum did. I mean, that's the dream. But we have a long ways to go to get to that point. Mike, really appreciate your time today. Where can people find your show?
So if you just search for the Humanist Report on YouTube, I am there. Have a video every single day almost at 8 a.m. I am a loudmouth on the internet who complains a lot. So.
All right. Well, if people need some more folks to hear some progressive news from, I highly recommend the Humanist Report, all those guys over at Leftist Mafia. Thanks so much for your time today, Mike. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.